Hi everyone. Just doing a quick camera check. My table's all crooked. Okay. I'm actually using my 1/4-inch foot with a guide today. I don't normally do that, but I'm living on the edge. Okay, get my ruler out of the way. So let's see. Kelly's up in Maine, up a little chilly north. Hey Kelly. Carolyn. Oh, Carolyn, you're in Florida. Let's see, southern Florida. So it's probably in the 70s maybe, 80s. Probably mixes up right now a little bit. So we have a few minutes to wait. Excuse me. Honest to God, I know I keep telling you this. I swear I don't cough until I hit live. I got my tea nearby, but it's so hot I can't drink it. I'm really ready. So Kelly was talking about she's waiting for her A and B fabric plates, and Kelly, tell you, you're gonna just think you're gonna cut until you run out of fabric. It's so nice compared to try to put those warped plastic shims through. You're gonna think you're in heaven. Oh, you're in the Villages, Carolyn. You're in the Villages. So that's north of Disney. North and a little west, I think, maybe. Close. I think I'm close. Not sure. So we just have a couple minutes to wait. I'd like to give everybody a chance to get settled in. I didn't put up on Facebook the amount of fabric needed because this isn't a project, it's a block, so you can use some scraps and that. But I know most of you just follow along and then maybe do some later. So I thought I'd keep it simple. You can relax, put your feet up, maybe cut a little. I did say I was using the strip set. What do they call it? Fabric strips. I'm looking here, fabric dyes, multimedia dyes, right here. Fabric strips. And they are, oh, I guess I'm up to, I might be in a little close. There we go. And they are, and this is cut size, not finished size. So 1.5, and they're all 1.5 by 5 inches, 2 by 5.5, 2.5 by 6, 3 by 6.5, 4 by 7, 5 by 7.5. I'm trying to remember what we used last week. Isn't that terrible? We made the mug rug, so we used the biggest one. So if you haven't seen the last week's Thursday night video, so that would have been Thursday, March 11th, 2021, because who knows what year you may watch this. Well, there goes that car every night the same time. I always want, it's downhill here. I always wonder if you can make it uphill. So that's the sizes. I'm almost inclined that next time they have a sale, Crafter's Companion has a sale on this, I might get a second set, and you'll see why in a little bit. Because these aren't that expensive as dye, as dyes goes for strip dyes especially. So yes, I do. So Kelly, if you didn't watch last Thursday, and I think even the Thursday before, the last few Thursdays, I think I did one, not last Thursday, but the Thursday before. You'll have to count backwards, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Is that right? So that's the, 4th? Isn't that terrible? I'm old enough that I still have to use my fingers. I did one where you can either use the rectangles from the, oh my God, what is it called? Build-A-Block Plus has rectangles. And I use those and this type, and I told you about the difference between them. And then last week, we used the biggest one to cut all the pieces plus the batting for a mud rug in one swipe. So you'll be fine. And I'm gonna use them. That's all I'm gonna use tonight. Is I'm gonna use the 2-inch. So that means it's gonna finish 1.5. So I guess I should pretend that we're actually starting. Oh, hi, how you doing? Okay, so hi everyone. How you doing tonight? We are using the fabric strip dies from Crafter's Companion. I'm having a moment here. And you can use the Junior or the regular machine, the regular size Gemini. I don't have to call it anymore because they have the gigantic one. So I guess I can call it the, I don't know. I'll just call it the regular Gemini. That's the easiest thing. Some of these smaller ones will also go through the Go. But now they don't have the little, I did ask if they were going to do the little fabric plates for the Go, but I don't know if anyone was listening. So I'm going to use the 2, so it'll finish 1.5. And what I'm going to make is a log cabin block. And this is part of one, but we're going to make a log cabin block. And you'll notice this little square in the center is a square, but we're still going to use our strip die to make the square. So I thought you'd like that as well. So this really has one more row. No, I'm going to do 2 more rows. So I picked 4 darks and 4 lights. And when you pick your darks, you're going to go from, now this is going to sound funny, your lightest dark to your darkest dark. In the same way with your lights, you're going to go from your lightest light to your darkest light. And you'll see it because I'll do the whole block. And it's a pretty easy block. And you might want to just make a note. So starting April 1st, it'll be on my blog and on YouTube, Miss Loreens Schoolhouse. And the blog is Loreen, LOREEN .typepad, TYPEPAD.com. And I have all the links in the description. So in April, every day, cross my fingers, every day I'm going to do a post where I'm kind of looking at what I'm going to be doing for the year. Nothing set in stone. It just kind of gives me a little roadmap. So each day I'm going to post a different project. Might be a unfinished one from, I don't know, 2002. Might be something new I'm going to do. Might be sewing. I think I have some crochet. So one of the things I'm going to be doing, and I honestly don't know which day, is I'm going to take this block and I'm going to show you how you can make this quilt really fast so that we can do 5-10 blocks at a time. So just make a note of it to start checking the Facebook or the blog. I'll try to remember to remind everyone on YouTube, because I know a lot of you don't do Facebook, but you do YouTube, and YouTube, not Facebook kind of thing. But anyways, I'm just doing 1 block tonight, but in April, I'm going to show you how to do a bunch of blocks at one time. So it's sort of like when you're done kind of thing. Now, normally a log cabin has red in the middle, light on one side, and light on dark. And there's 2 stories. This is the fire of the home, the fireplace where everybody sits around and stays warm. And this is summer, and this is winter, or this is day, and this is night. So normally it's red, and it's usually scrappy. But in this case, I had a fat quarter bundle that I'm going to try to squeak out as much as I can. And in my case, because I'm doing a fat quarter bundle, I have a fat quarter of each color. All my blocks aren't going to be the same colors going out, but they're going to be darks and lights, if that makes sense to you. And you'll see in April and over the coming months as I progress, I'll show you the differences. But they're all going to have the green in the middle, because in the fat quarter bundle it had this one green. So how's that for a little log cabin history? Hey, Rhonda. Okay, so if you're cutting this with a rotary cutter, you're cutting these one. What did I say? Two. I keep trying to say 1.5. 2 inches, a 2-inch cut. And normally, when you do a strip for a log cabin, you would have yardage and not a fat quarter. So a yardage would be from salvage to salvage is anywhere between 40 and 42, 44. They're not so much 44 anymore. Where a fat quarter is half that. If you think of a fat quarter, is they take a half a yard of fabric, salvage to salvage, and cut it in half at that fold. So it's a quarter of yard of fabric, what would you say, cubically? So instead of being a quarter of a yard of fabric is 9 inches by 42, roughly. A fat quarter is 18 by 21. So you get the same fabric amount, it's just wider and shorter, and a lot of people like that because they need that width. If you don't need the width and you need the length, it's always less money to buy a regular quarter yard of fabric. In case you need to know that tidbit. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside for 1 minute. So the first thing I need to do, even in the case of a fat quarter, is I need to cut the salvages off. So if you're doing yardage, you're going to have a salvage at each end. And if you cut that salvage off right at the beginning, then you won't forget to cut it off later on. Now, I'm not going to sit and get all fussy with getting this exactly straight because I'm going to be using the die. Remind me, I put that up on my machine. Someone's got to remind me. So when you're cutting with a die, then you don't have to be exact on getting this right. So I got to stand up here and be counted. So I'm going to go ahead. I've already got everything ironed in Best Press. Let me move this over a little bit so you can see the fabric instead of me. Or I use Best Press or starch before I cut anything, and that just gives a little more body to your fabric, especially through the die cutting machine or cutting with your ruler. It just gives you a little more stability. And when you use Best Press or starch, you press it until it's dry. So if it's damp, keep on pressing because it does make a difference in the body, how much body it gives to the fabric. Okay, so that part's done. I'm going to turn my iron on, my little iron on, so I don't forget to do that. Okay, so let's do some cutting of the strips, and then I'm going to do this one last to show you how to get the squares. So, look, I'm setting everything up there. Okay. So when on a fat quarter, remember it's longer one way than the other because it's 18 by 21 and maybe 20 now. So we want to fold the longest way. So in other words, when I lay my fabric down to get ready to put the die on it to fold it, the long way is this way. So I'm going to take the longest other end and fold it up. You always, and I know I give you these tidbits that probably have nothing to do with what we're doing, but whenever you're working with a fat quarter, you always want to cut, leaving as the length as much as you can. But because if I cut across here and I cut off 2 inches, now I've lost that 21, 22 length that a lot of times you want to have. So I always try to cut so that I'm working my way across the short side, and so that if I only need this much fabric, the part I have left still has that 20, 21, 22 inch length that I'm telling you you'll be a happy person that you did it. It sounds better than say you'll be an unhappy person if you don't. So I just folded it twice. So I folded it in half and folded it in half again, so that I want to make sure. Now, if you remember with the strip dies, there's no cutting on the top and the bottom. And the point of that is to have one long strip. So if you were cutting salvage to salvage, you don't want to lose that 42 inches of strip, especially if you're doing binding or a border or something like that. So there's no, and if you have them or if you get them, they can see. So there's the cutting ridge, and see how there isn't any here and there isn't any here. So those parts can hang off the fabric because they're not going to cut. If it was on the fabric like this, you'd have to cut the rest of this yourself, because it's not cutting across here at all. Okay, so I have, what do I have? I have 4 pieces of fabric, and I have half. Remember, I have half of what a salvage to salvage is. So you should be able to fold and get 8 layers. Okay, so I'm going to use 2 pieces and I'll get my 8 layers. 8 layers went through just fine. So I got that one, and now I'm going to take the next one, and I always want to stop and make sure I open it up all the way, because sometimes I guess that I've got it going the long way, and I'm wrong. So I know it's hard to believe, and I'm going to lay that one right on top of the first one. And I'm not going to fuss around with getting all these ends perfectly straight, because I'm just going to move in a little bit with my die, so you can see how there's some dark color there and light color. So I don't have to sit here and fiddle with it for 10 minutes. I'm just going to move in a little ways where I know I have all of them, all the fabrics, and start from there. Okay, so clear plate, A plate, and I'm using the fabric plates, and I know you're going to get some here. See if I can get down here far enough. I know you're going to get glare from these are the most glary things that I've ever seen. So it's always A that you're cutting into. So A is first, and then B goes on top. So it's pretty easy to remember. I'm using the big Gemini plates because I have to laugh, because I have to laugh at myself. So I was using the Gemini Junior plates, and more of this fabric was really hanging off, and I had 2 layers, and it was pretty heavy. And every time I'd put it in, even if I taped it, out the other end would just come the plates, and the fabric and the dye would still be back, or the dye would fall out or go out the other way, but the fabric would always kept falling out backwards. So and the first couple of times it was fine, so I don't know what I was doing, but the first time it panicked me, because I couldn't find the dye, and I thought the dye was inside the machine, and you know how you just have that moment. So we want to have it a little bit at an angle, because when you take something that's straight like this, straight through, it's going to make more of that popping sound than you probably really want to listen to. So if you go a little bit of the angle, it takes the stress off of the machine, because it's coming in, and this is coming into the pressure points at an angle instead of all at one time. It'll still cut fine, it just makes a lot of racket. So the other thing I'm going to do now, normally, God, I'm talking a mile a minute. Normally, I turn my plates every cut. This time I'm going to turn them every other cut, and you'll see why in a second. So I'm not going to tape up here. I'm going to tape down here. And I really am taping to hold my fabric from falling out the other end. And with the longer plates, shoot, I put the Gemini. So the Gemini ones are like this part here. And you have to feed them in the short way. So I only had like this much that the dye was on, and the rest of the fabric was hanging off. So I just want to make sure at this bottom end that I'm not past my plate. Now, whether I fold this over or not doesn't really matter, because once it gets past the dye, there's no pressure on the fabric, because the dye, the thickness of the dye is what makes the pressure. Okay, so, and again, if you want to put a little tape on the dye, you can. And I'm going to cut this, and you'll see why I put the tape down here. So B is next, and then another clear plate. So your sandwich is always clear, A, B, clear. Okay? Oh, hi, Lynn. I didn't see that you came in. Okay, so I'm just going to take these plates off. And I'm going to take this tape off. Well, apparently I'm only taking half. Oh my God, I'm taking it off in pieces. Guess we won't be using that piece again, will we? Okay, so I'm going to take my die off. And I didn't fold exactly right to that edge. So I just got a little snip there. Oop. It's just like a couple threads, and you never want to yank the couple threads because you'll put a run in your fabric. So there's my strips. And see, if I open them up, there's the whole strip. And if you have the whole salvage to salvage, you'd have an even longer one. So let me set those out of the way for a second. So now, because I take my fabric down, all I have to do is come right here and move down a little bit. I don't have to fuss around with getting that fabric all situated again. I thought that was kind of handy. And you could go all the way down, but I think I would only do 2 because I'd want to turn my plates. Is anybody cutting anything out tonight just for practice? Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and turn my plate. So I'm going to turn it over. Now they tell you to turn it and turn it again, so I'll do that. So I'm going to turn it and turn it. And I just got that one little thread. And I'd rather just do that little thread cut than try to renegotiate my fabric again. So, So when I'm doing a log cabin quilt, I only cut, well, it depends how, I would only cut 3 or 4 strips of each color. I wouldn't cut the whole thing because you don't know how much you're going to need. And you'll see as we go along. So I'm going to use less of this fabric than this one. And as I go out with each one, I'm using more of the fabric. So at some point, I'm going to kind of reverse them around or mix them up a little bit more, only because I'm trying to work with this fat quarter bundle I have. So I might not have the lightest to the darkest, but they're all dark on one side and they're all light on the other. And that's the most important part. So I did cut some ahead, so I'm going to go ahead and cut one more set, just to give you a little repeat. The hardest thing with these fabric plates is I have hard time getting the tape off than I do any other kind of issues. Okay, so let me set this one aside. And again, okay, so now I already turned it. Okay. Okay, so again, I'm going to double check my fabric. Make sure I want the longest part. What is that? Vertical to me, and the shortest part horizontal to me. And me, I mean I'm sitting here. So I folded it in half, and I'll just fold it in half again. And I'm just going to, if I set it this way, it'll probably fall off into my lap. And I'm going to, because when I folded this to cut the salvage, I folded it so that the salvage was at one end. So I'm really folded on the short side. So if you need to remind yourself, the minute you cut that salvage, go ahead and refold back to the long way, or just open up the fat cord. If you're using fat quarters, just open it up all the way. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing again, except which I was going this way. So now I'm going to just come down a little ways, because you like to use all your plate. Though I will tell you, and I've been using this for a few weeks now, and the only thing I get that you can see, and you think that it's etched in, but it's really just fabric, like little fuzzes of fabric. That's why I said, Kelly, you're going to be happy. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to tape a little ways down, and I'm taping down here just because I have so much weight hanging off there that it would just pull it right off. And then see how I'm coming down a little ways. That way I don't have to worry about if one piece of the fabric is in further than another. And it's, what does it waste? 1/8 of an inch of fabric? Sometimes fussing around with it takes up way more of your time than that 1/8 of a piece of fabric is worth the bother of, I guess. Okay, so we're on the A, then the B, and then the other clear. Okay, I'm just going to set the B and the clear aside. Pull that tape up. I'm going to look and see if anybody has any questions. And see, I didn't have to trim that one at all. and it's, I know you can't see it, but it's like one little thread. And I'm coming, see how little there is there? I'm just coming inside of that little edge. I'm struggling there for a minute, struggling. Okay, so now I did 2 cuts. So I'm going to turn my plate. And this time I'm just going to turn it over and turn it over. And I'm using the Crafter's Companion low tack tape. Okay, and I'm going to turn this one over and this one over. And I apologize again for the glare. Okay, so now I want some squares. And the square for the center, so this is cut 2, so this would be a 2-inch square. Excuse me. So I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I'm just gonna cut 1. But if you're doing it, you'd probably be cutting, 2. Okay, being clear. So did you hear that extra crunch that time? I did. So I'm just going to take that off. And even though I had this at an angle, sometimes less fabric makes more noise than more fabric when you're cutting. So I'm done with that fabric. I'll stick these to my finger, see if I can hang on to them. So now I want to make these into squares, so I just have to turn this. See? So I'm going to fold this over, and I'm just going to put this on like this. Put this on like this. That's not telling you anything, is it? Put the strip die on. So now, because I cut the first way, I cut and got 2 inches. Now I'm cutting in the opposite direction. So like horizontal, then vertical. So that'll give me a 2-inch square without having to get my Build-A-Block set out. I know, lazy, isn't it? Okay, so as soon as I'm done this part, I'm going to get ready to sew. So if any of you are following along, you want to have at least, I would say if you're going to follow along, make a little sample, at least have enough to do 2 lights, 2 darks, even if they're the same, because if you have a little sample, the getting started part is the hardest, and once you get going, it becomes much easier. So if you want to put a little sample in your resource book, just cut some lights and darks or whites and reds, or blue and green, so that they're opposite or contrast to each other. And then we'll get ready to sew. Okay, so we're all done cutting for the moment. And see, that worked out just fine. And these little pieces, I don't think there's any point to try to line up and maybe try to squeeze one more square out of the group. I just find that whenever I do that, I spend so much time doing it, and then it doesn't come out right because I've squeezed it too close. And so I've already had the pain for you, so you don't have to go through that. And let me just put my die over with the dies. There we go. Okay, so does anybody have any questions before we start sewing? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my strips. And I'm just going to, well, I can take them both, I guess. So these are my lights. So I'm going to go this way. So they're working their way sort of darker, if you know what I mean. And see, I did pick a color, but it's a much lighter color than the darks are. A lot of times I'll start with a white on white, but I decided to just let this go as it is. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my darks. So if I remember correctly, this was the darkest one. And it's not like it's an exact science. It's whatever makes you happy. That's what you're gonna do. If you like two colors together, or you don't like a certain two colors together, then just do it how you like. It's your quilt. Don't let anybody boss you around. Okay, so I'm working from here up, and then I'm working from here up. Does that make sense so far to everyone? So I'm going to pretend you're all shaking your head yes. Someone can give me like, what is it, the thumbs up? Rhonda, come on with a thumbs up. I haven't got any like hands or anything. I wonder what's wrong. Okay, so if we look at this, we're starting with our green. So here's my little green squares. I'll put them right there. We're starting with a green and a light. Okay? Now, you can see that this light is the same size as this one. And some people cut this first light to this size. I don't, because I run off the same strip. And a lot of times, I know how much fabric I need for the center. So say I was doing 30 or 40 blocks. I can pretty well guess I can cut all my centers for those 40 blocks right away. But the light colors, I may change light colors somewhere along the way, or I might switch them up. So I don't commit myself to this one always being the same, because I like each of the two to be the same. So these two lights are the same fabric. These two lights are the same fabric. These two darks are the same fabric. These two are the same fabric. That's what I'm going for today. You can do it all scrappy, but for me, as a rule, that's how I do it. I do 2, 2, 2, 2. So I got my little square and my light fabric. So I'm just going to put them right sides together. And technically, it doesn't really matter what size you sew on because we're going to trim it. But your obvious side, well, here's what we're going to do. Because we're going to be sewing this way for all the rest of it, we're going to sew so this strip is coming towards us. So we're sewing on the right side of this strip. And you'll see why as we go along. And I think if you just keep it the same the whole time, then it doesn't get as confusing. So I've covered my mouse with fabric. I can't find it. You can see my hands down here trying to find it. Okay, so I'm going to switch the camera. Let me just, oh, thanks, Rhonda. She gave me a thumbs up. Okay, so we're going to switch. And I'm going to turn this a little bit because I can't cut down this shine because it's the light for the work area, if you know what I mean. So I'm trying not to blind you, and it might not be that bright on the screen. So 1/4 inch foot with the guide, Microtech 7010 needle, sewing thread, top in the bobbin. I'm using a off-white. What else do you need to know? I'm on a baby lock. So baby lock brother, I'm using stitch 1-03, which it's the default stitch. So most all your machines default to the straight stitch, needle in the middle. So I just want to make sure I line up my guide, which is right there, with my fabric. And I will tell you that just because you have a guide doesn't mean you're going to end up with a 1/4 inch seam, because I've seen many a student get that fabric easily under that guide, and next thing you know, they've got a seam that's practically a 1/2 inch. So you need to keep your eyeball to make sure you don't slide that fabric under the guide. And I'm just going to sew until I'm like 1 stitch off that center square. Okay? Now let's come back to the work table. And I got to do this so I don't, let me move these up a little. I'm afraid I'm going to end up cutting everybody up here. Well, I can take this one and take it away because I'm not going to use it again. So let me get that out of the way. There we go. Okay, so here's where we stitched. But before we open it up, we're going to just trim this so that they're equal. So I'm just putting the ruler down at the end of the green square here, making sure my ruler's straight in both directions. And trimming this off. Now we're going to use it again. So now I just got to press this open. And I'm going to press to the, I guess we'll press to the dark side. I'm almost thinking I should go the other way. Yeah, we're going to press to the, we're going to press to whoever we stitched last will be on top. So we're going to put the fabric we used that we sewed on and just press it open. Okay, now, and I always tell you this, I don't have room to put my iron here, right now, the pressing station here. If you want to press this with your iron, you're simply going to do this. That's it, okay? Because we don't want stretching out of shape. All right? You with me so far? Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine so I can show you how to set up for the next stitching, and this is the only one that you have to think about. So what I want to do is I'm always going to put my strip down. And if I need to, I can put the strip down. Oh, no, that didn't work out well, did it? And then put my needle down, and I have pivot on, so it automatically lifts my foot up. But now, see, it's holding on for me. Okay? And what I want to, oh, wait a minute, if I got it up. Now, see, I even have to think a minute. So, if I sew this way and open it up, isn't that terrible? I always have to think about this. I think it's this way. No, all right, hold on a second. Hold on, because this is going to happen to you. So let's go back to the work table for a minute. And that's why I'd like you to do a little sample if you can. So let's go back to the work table. After this first stitching of putting a longer fabric, a strip on, it's as easy as can be. So here's our block. Hold on, because when I put it on the strips, it kind of disappears, doesn't it? Okay, so here's our block. All right. So here's the piece we just did. Here's the short piece here. So that's going to go right there. Okay. And then this next piece ends up here. So if we flip this over, and let's do like we normally do, and stick a pin in it on the side we're supposed to sew on, because we really want to sew with the strip down. Now if I turn it over, oh, see, I'm upside down. Oh, darn it. All right. Oh, I know. So, all right. It's just me. I'm having a moment. So if I sew down this right side, if I no, see, I got to open up. See, I told you, probably because I'm thinking about it too much. I think it would be this way. And when I open up, the problem is I want to be, let's do it this way. I want to have my strip down. And honestly, bear with me, because this will get eased. This is the only time that at least I have the problem. So I want my strip down, and then this piece I already did now flips this in this direction. So when I open this up, I'm just like that. I just had my block upside down. That was my issue. Okay, does that make sense? So let me do this. So when we put our strip down, we want facing us, towards this way, facing us, we want to have the piece that we sewed on last. That's the best way to remember it. The piece that we sewed on last is facing us. And then flip it over. Okay? And you don't really need to pin, but I know some of you are gonna. Okay? So now that I got you all confused, you're going to put your next strip down, and you're going to have the fabric that you stitched on last facing you. Good, Rhonda? Okay. I'm sorry. I go through this every time I start a set after I haven't done it for a while. Okay. So let's just sew that piece. I'm going to take that pin out, because I'm not going to use any more pins, I hope. And I'm just going to stitch till I'm one stitch off of the top fabric. Okay? So when we open it, we're good. Okay? But before we open it, we're going to trim it exact same way. I'm lining my ruler up, and you'll see it more when I change colors. I'm lining my ruler up with the edge of the top fabric. I'm making sure that my ruler is straight. And I'm trimming that off. And I'm done with that strip for now because I've used it twice. And I'm going to go ahead and put my iron down. I'm just going to put it straight down. Okay? So we've done 2 lights. Now we're going to do 2 darks. And remember, I'm working from light to dark. Okay, so I'm going to take this strip. Okay? And what we're doing is, oh, I had them in a different order. I should probably make them in the same order. They were this way. See? So here's what we've done. And now we're going to be adding on the 2 pieces. And the first one that's going on is here. And you'll see why when I go over to the sewing machine. Now it's going to become easier to you. Actually, the first one was easy if I thought about it because I used the same theory with the rest of them. So who knows? All right, so let's sew. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my strip and I'm going to put my needle down because for me my foot comes up. So now I can slide this. See if I can back up a little bit more. There we go. So I want to put my little patch down. Here's the last fabric I worked on. Now from this point forward, the fabric that's here will not have a seam. That's how I remember that. So, and I know now it's the last fabric I used because it has no seam. But I always look for there's no seam there. And I'm just going to lay this right on top. Make sure it's lined up. And then again, just 1 stitch past the fabric. So let me move this out of the way. Okay, so I'm done with that fabric. I'm just going to move it so it gives me a little bit more room. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open it and make sure that I didn't come out over here. I don't want to keep going in one angle. So first I'm working on the right, then I'm working on the left, then the right, then the left, then the right, then the left. Okay, so before you trim, you want to open up and make sure you're not on this side or that side up there, because here's that last fabric we stitched on before, and see how it has no seam. Okay, so we're going to trim it up. Okay, when we press, we're going to have the piece that we just sewed on top and press it out. Okay, so we're looking good so far. So now we'll be coming along here. If you find that you're really raggedy here, you can trim it up, but don't get in the habit of relying on that to do your trim. You want to make sure that you line up your ruler with some seams this way and just trim it off. You don't want to trim too much because you don't want half your blocks a quarter inch or a half inch shorter than the other half. So don't rely on trimming that up. Try not to get into that. If you're off a little bit on this area that's not perfectly straight, you're going to sew with the guide to your strip, and your strip is straight. So I'll see if I can do it on the next piece. So if this area is not perfect, you're going to line it up as best you can, but you're going to use the strip for your guide. Okay? So I'm going to put my strip down again. I only had to do that 20 times because I'm not right over the machine. And here comes my fabric, right side down, and here's the last fabric I did, and again, it has no seam. Here's the one we used last time, but now it has a seam. This one has a seam. This one has a seam. So if you just remember either the last fabric you sewed and double check to make sure it has no seam. Okay? Okay, is that starting to make sense? So we're going to flip this over just to be sure. We have 2 darks, 2 lights. The other dark isn't over here with the lights. It's over this way. The lights and darks touching each other is only going to be the short distance. It's never going to be the long distance. I'll say that, and then it's going to be a light over here, isn't it? But when we put another light over here, it's only touching the black this 2-inch distance. Does that make sense? Okay, so once we're sure we've got it right, and you always want to trim it with the patch on top because it's harder to do it this way and then try to guess what's underneath there. And again, I'm going to make sure that my ruler on the vertical is lined up nice and straight. Okay, and I'm done with that one, and I have to trim this because I know when I put it underneath, I was over quite a bit because I'm not standing right over the machine. I'm kind of to the side, so you shouldn't have to do that. Okay, then we're going to flip it back so the last fabric we used is on top, and then press it. All right, so now we did 2 darks. We're going to be back to lights again. So I'm going to grab my next light, and I'll just get the other one out of the way. Okay, and if you want to pin it, lay your strip down, lay your patch, so that, see how that has no seam, and it's the last fabric we put on, and line it up, because I know some of you like to pin, so I'll pin with you this time. But all right, no more than 1 pin though, that's the limit. Okay, and we can remember your strip is always on the bottom, and I'm just calling it the patch for lack of a better word, and the patch is on top, right side down. I say that because I had this right side down for some reason the other day. Again, make sure you're lined up on the edge. I know I took my pin out, but my hand is there. We're coming to a seam and see how it wants to, the presser foot wants to push it back, just, if you have your pivot on, your foot will come up, just press it under. If you don't, just reach back to your lever, and you just have to pull your foot up a little bit. You don't have to put it all the way up, just enough to flatten that seam out. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and see if you can, okay, so you can see right there, let me zoom in a little bit, because you know we're not perfect sewers, but here's a good example. Do you see how, for some reason, don't know why, my top patch is coming in a little bit? You see, because the green underneath, and then it goes back to how it's supposed to. There's no problem, as long as you're like 1/8 of an inch or less, because you're using a 1/4 inch seam. So my guide, my guide is going to follow right along the strip, and nobody will ever know that I got this little, I don't know what little piece sticking out of there. I'm not quite sure what that was, but a little crooked sewing of some sort. So does that make sense? And let me put this back again. There we go. Oh, got to cut my thread. Okay, so I'm going to open this up, and I'm on the light side, and see how it's only on that short piece of the dark, and there's long sections of light against light. That's how it's going to be the whole way. You shouldn't have a long section of dark running along a long section of light. Okay, so always flip it over just to be sure. And we're going to just do the same trim, lining up on the horizontal. Okay, flip it over because we want to press, so this goes over. So when we look on the back, everything's nice and neat, well, except for some threads there, but all your seams are nice and neat and flat. Okay, so I'll pin one more time with you. Now, I'm not going to pay any attention to the what is it called? The pattern being in one direction or another. If you pay attention, you've got to pay attention the whole time, and you either pay attention the whole way or you don't pay any attention at all. So if you want so I have the top of my house is facing into the center, and you know, once this is in a quilt, it could be facing in any direction. But if, like, for example, you want this house, the top of the house is facing in, just make the top of the house facing in. So then you'll have to go this way because that's why it's hard to so you think, all right, so so if we're looking at this, I think that you're going to think, if it's here, that the house needs to face in. Well, it does, except we're sewing on this side, not that side. So this side is the side that's going to be facing in. So if I put this down opposite of what I think, I'm just going to hold my finger there, and I'm going to flip it up. And now you can see, well, maybe you can't, but now the top of the houses are facing in. Do you see what I mean? Because we're not sewing, flipping this on top. We're sewing, flipping this piece on top, and then it's got to be turned around so that this, remember, the piece that has no seam is facing us. So what you want to do if you have directional, that's what I couldn't think of, directional fabric, is lay it down exactly how it's going to be sewn at the machine, which means the strip is on the bottom, the patch is on the top. Just put your finger there, flip it over, and go, yeah, good to go. Oh, I was supposed to pin, wasn't I? All right. So I'm going to stick a pin in. So the most important, I guess, part of this right this minute is this being straight to this. And you know how I like to pin it over here. I don't want to pin it here because the second I get over to the machine, I got to pull the pin out. With the pin being way over to the left, I could stitch the whole way down and not have to move that pin. So if you're going to put a pin in, make it worth your while. So I'm straight across the top and on the side. Okay? So let's sew, and now we're going to get going just a little bit faster. Oh, I got to get my thread's doing a little curlicue. And I lined up the top of the block, but I didn't line up the right side. I didn't line up the right side perfectly. Trying to keep my hand out of your way. So if I just take a couple stitches, I can stop because the needle is my third hand, and so now this isn't going to get away from me, and I can just make sure that everybody's lined up along that right side. Gonna make sure I go slow past that seam that's facing to the back because the foot could flip it back. Okay? So you getting the hang of it? I'm getting the hang of it. Okay, so the same thing. Oh, take that pin out. So the same thing, before I cut, I'm going to flip this over. So now you can really see how all of this is light to light, and just this little width of the strip, which is the 2 inches, is touching the dark, and vice versa. See? So if you have this long area with white next to it, you put it on the wrong side. But once you get started, and you always have that fabric strip that has no seam facing you, with your strip down first on your machine, you shouldn't have any issue. Okay, and again, when I flip it over, now I got a little more room to press. So if you want to press with your iron, press because you're going to set your seam. The little strip is on the top. I'm going to push it over, and we're just pressing at the seam. We're not coming out to this edge or this edge. We're just pressing along that seam. You really want to, by nature, just iron. Okay? So we've done 2 lights. Now we're going to do 2 darks. So now I'm going to go back to doing it the other way. I don't know why my alarm keeps going off. Okay, so let's go back to sewing. So I'm gonna lay my strip up. Now, if you don't want to put it all the way in because you have to lift and put it down, lift and put it down, just have it right here. Let me see if I can back up a little more. My little computer cord won't let me go too far. Okay, so my strip is down, face up. When I take my patch, I'm looking for the piece that has no seam. So when I flip it over, and I'm going to push it back a little ways, this is the piece facing me, and there's no seam across that whole thing. Do you see everywhere else there's a seam, there's a seam, there's a seam, there's a seam. This is the only piece, because you just stitched it on, that doesn't have a seam. Okay? And you have to wait until you flip it over to check where it needs to be, because it's opposite of what you think think it is. For lack of a better way to say that. Say, look, Ma, no pins. Okay. Okay, so again, before we cut, we're not going to get all full of ourselves and think we know what we're doing. So I'm going to flip it over. And again, all the dark is to the dark, and just this little bit is on the light. We know it's good. Okay, and then we're going to turn it around so that little, the new piece we stitched on is on top. Set our seam. Flip it back. Okay, so if you need to, because you're gonna feel like you got to move around and do something besides this little thing, just always lift your iron up. So if you have your big iron, you probably do this in one press down. Okay? We've used this once, we're going to use it again. So let's go back and sew. So, well, you know what? Because this is getting bigger, let me do it on the table so you can see it easier. So here's how our strip's going to be at the machine. We need to flip this to the wrong side before we start looking for that piece with no seam. Trust me, it just works out better that way. Okay? So I'm lining up across the top and the side. And now I'll go sew. Keeping an eye always on that. There's only ever going to be two seams. One is facing to the back of the machine. It's the first one in case it wants to flip up. But the next one that's down here is facing towards you, so you don't have to worry about it. So you only have to pay attention. I got a whole bunch of threads there. You only have to pay attention to this first seam. So you only have to pay attention to the first 2 inches of sewing. Well, I thought it was funny. And normally I would have both hands here, but I'm trying to keep my hands out of your way. So I'm making the best of one hand covering where both hands go. But this left hand is always going to stay on the fabric until we're done sewing. Okay, and I do this every single time. I flip it over and go, yeah, all to the dark. He should be next to his brother right there, the same color, only a little bit on the light. Good. And it's okay if you talk out loud and talk to yourself. It's okay. I got to make sure I turn this over because I want the strip on top so that when we flip this out, the seam allowance is going to go behind that new strip. And you notice we never have to match up points or seams or anything like that. Oh, see, I did that and I forgot to cut. Okay, so you're going to do that. I'm glad I did it so I didn't forget to tell you. I wouldn't leave this open and cut. It never works out for me. I would just close it back up and do it like I'm supposed to. It just, all I can say might work for you, but it never, never, ever works for me. I end up with some kind of little curve in or out or something like that. You'll see. You'll sneak and do it when I'm not looking, and then you'll see, and you'll go, oh, yeah, she told me about that. So I can iron in this section. I just don't want to iron out at my curve. So if you get the urge that you need to, flatten it out around, go ahead. It's okay. Okay? So we have 2 darks, 2 lights. We started with light, so we're going back to the light side again. Okay? So our next light is this one. And you can see where, this is on my strip, you can see where if you have longer strips, that they'll be a little more economical. I think. I haven't got there yet. Okay? So before I line anything up, because I'm looking at this, if you're looking at this and you're going, okay, that doesn't make any sense because I've got a dark to a light. But remember, I told you this needs to be upside down before you think about arranging it. So once I turn this upside down, and I have that strip across here that has no seam, guess what? I'm light to light. So do you see what I mean about don't try to line it up until you flip the patch, the log cabin itself, over onto the strip. And then make sure you have that piece that we just sewed and it has no seam facing towards you. Does that make sense? Okay? And Lynn, if you're listening, I'm going to limit you. You can now have 2 pins. Not 5, not 10, 2. Just 2. And I say that because you all know that I'm not at her house, so she can put as many pins in as she wants. But now, when she puts those 5 pins in, she's going to hear me in her ear. Not sure that that's a good thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and sew. Okay? I know Lynn. Lynn says she likes pins. Pins are her best friend. And I'll easily admit to you that pins are not my best friend. The more I pin, the worse I do. Okay, so before we cut, we're going to flip it over. And you can see easily now as this gets bigger, the light that we just put on is running the longest part of it along another light, and there's just a little piece of the dark next to it. I was going to iron. See that? I almost ironed again. And always take the time to make sure your ruler is straight this way, not just this way. So I always say this way and this way, and it makes if you're not looking at me, it makes no sense. So make sure that your horizontal lines of your ruler are matching up with the seam allowances, and your seam allowances are not going to be perfect. So you just do the best you can. This isn't your prom dress. It's a quilt, and it's a log cabin quilt. And the log cabin quilt is made, in my world, it's made to be stress-free and not get over stressed about points meeting, seams meeting, and all that stuff. So I don't want you to go wild and willy-nilly and you end up with diamonds instead of squares. Okay, so now we're going to press. So we always want to turn it over. Now I have to tell you this story that happened to me today, and this will tell you how I have to laugh at myself. So my little iron, I was pressing the bigger, some of these fat quarters, and the little area I have next to where I film is small, so I just have this little area. So I had to take my little iron, and I had a big tall roll, 20-inch roll of stabilizer. So I set the little iron on top of it. So if you think of it, it's set down like below the table. And I was working on the computer for a minute, and my leg was starting to itch. And so I went to scratch it, and it was actually, my leg was up against the iron, and it was just about to burn me. I know, maybe after I tell you that story, you don't want to listen to what I say about sewing. See, I know this kind of stuff happens to all of us. But I at the time I did it, I said to myself, I had to remember to tell you guys tonight what I did. Because it just barely started to hurt, and it was like, oh, what is that? Okay, so here we are again. So we did one. Remember, I'm doing 2 of each color. That's how I normally would do it. If you're doing scrappy, you scrap it up that it's light on one side, dark on the other. Okay? So again, if I put this how it's supposed to be, this is at the wrong end. Okay? But if I flip it over, now it's where it's supposed to be. Okay? So that's why I'm stressing, don't try to figure out where this block goes again before you flip it over, because now I have it right side up. I have the part that needs to be towards me at the bottom, but now you're looking at it, and again, you're going, okay, this is all dark, I'm on the wrong side. But if you do it from the way it's going to be sewn, right sides together, so your log cabin is always right side down, your strip is always right side up, guess what? You're in the right place, because you were really looking at putting it over on this side when it was flipped over. Hopefully that, I'm trying to like pound that into your head as a little thing to remember, because if you do it the same way every time, you'll be fine. Okay, so we're going to sew again. Oh, Rhonda likes pins too. Yeah, but Rhonda doesn't like ironing. I know that. I know Rhonda's secret. And I'm sure she's heard me tell the story a million times that she once told me that if she knew how much ironing was involved in sewing and quilting, she never would have started. But she doesn't hate it as much as she used to. I was about to say she likes it now, but I don't think I'd be that bold. So I'm not perfectly lined up along here, but if I take a couple stitches, so my needle is down holding my fabric, then I can just come and line these up. Let's see if I can, I'm going to move, hold on, close your eyes for a second. All right, I moved my wire up so that you can be further back. It's right where we cut and iron. So now you can see that now, wait a minute, I gotta get the fabric over the wire. So now, because my needle is holding my fabric for me, my third hand, I can line this whole piece right up here. You're staring at me now. And I'm good to go. I don't know, Lynn, I might let you have 3 pins at this point. I'm feeling bad for you now. And this is how I would normally be sewing. This hand is here, and this one is going to be to the front. Oh, but I can feel I curved in with my sewing because I looked up. Okay, so let me get my wire out of the way again. I don't want to cut that off. Okay, I just wanted to set the other camera back up so that I didn't have to do it while you were staring at it. Okay, again, the same old thing. Before I cut, flipping it over. Number one, your second fabric is always touching the first one of the same color. And here we go again. All of this is light, just a little dark. Now, if you see how I have this small piece left, I'm going to save this. So at some point, I'll use this as the first light. And I probably have a couple more. Because I'm working with a fat quarter pack, I got to hang on to everybody. So I can put this as a light near the beginning. Because as long as it's all lights on one side and darks on the other, it should look just fine. Okay, flip it over. So your strip is on top. Now, some people, when they do log cabins, they cut all these pieces to the right side size, length, to begin with. And to me, that's like you're putting all the work into it that the log cabin was supposed to keep you from having to do. So I'm going to do one more dark side because I got 3 lights, and I'm going to add another dark. Otherwise, it's not a square. And I won't go ahead and do the 4th one because it's the same thing. But let me do one more dark with you, and then we'll be good. So if you have any questions, let's see. Oh, Kelly, you're welcome. Lynn, yeah, I know you like the pin. Okay, Rhonda too. Yeah, Lynn. Lynn's saying thanks. I'm going to let her have an extra pin. I know what that really means. It's going to be like 5 pins. I know. So I've got 3 lights. I have 2 darks, so I need a new dark. Oh, and I already used that one. If you're doing this scrappy, you take 2 paper bags. If you can find paper bags, take 2 paper bags, 2 plastic bags, whatever. Put all your light strips in one. Put all your dark strips in the other. And just keep pulling, reach in the bag, pulling out, and you have to take what you get. No exchanging. And use it. When you're done with it, put it back in the bag. Then when you go to the light side, pull out a light one. I want you to try that sometime because it really is an experiment on sticking to what you're supposed to do. It's not easy. So laying the strip down. Here's my color that has no seam. The last one I did. Right side down. When it's on the strip, it's correct. Just in case you need to look. Okay, dark to dark. Sometimes you'll be startled and you'll think, oh no, it's supposed to be here because you were working on the light side. You're used to looking at the light side. So dark, dark. Okay? Well, I don't know, Lynn. I might let you have, what are we up to now? 4 pins? Or are we at 3? Maybe for each, you can start out with 1 pin, and for each new color, you get to add a pin. I don't know why I thought that was so funny. So here we go again. So I always stop and I just line up my block. And I stop because I tell you, there's no trophy for stitching something the whole way without stopping. If I've got too much of the underneath color, I'm just reaching, can you see where I'm reaching underneath and just pulling that strip back a little bit? Because sometimes they don't want to behave. So my hand, I know you can't see it, but my hand is underneath the log cabin holding that strip in place. And I know Lynn is saying right now, but if you'd have pinned it, you wouldn't have to do that. I hear you, Lynn. I hear you. Okay, so 1 more strip to go. And again, flip it over. Yep, we're good. I swear to you, I do that every time. Except when I do a whole bunch of blocks, I do it differently because I make a whole bunch at one time. So remember about sometime in April, that'll be on my blog. So you might want to do a log cabin quilt. Okay, so let's do our pressing. Guess we can flip it over, and you can see that it's looking pretty neat as far as all. Okay, so we'll do one more, and like I said, mine is going to have 4. So whatever you have, it has to be equal. If there's 3 here, there's 3 here. If there's 4 here, there's 4 here, 5, whatever. And your strips, if you do a different size strip, make sure that your square in the middle is the size of your strip. So if you did a 2.5-inch strips, if you used like a jelly roll and did 2.5-inch strips, this would be a 2.5-inch square. Okay, so I got one more to go, right? So again, I'm not even going to see how it needs to go until I turn it over. And the first thing when I turn it over, I'm going to make sure this is facing me. Then I'll lay it down and I'll be a happy person. And if you're not sure, couple fingers there, lift it up, okay? And I'll even put a pin in this one for Lynn. This is just for you, Lynn. See, it's the last strip. It's the end of the class. I'm putting a pin in just for you, okay? And I'll even put a pin halfway down. So let's see. Pinning today is brought to you by Lynn. I think I'm getting a little silly. We got to laugh, don't we? Okay? And if you have any questions, I'll check as soon as I'm done sewing this one part. Pardon my hand for just a minute. Okay. Take our pins out. Put them away. Double check before we trim. Make sure our ruler is straight on the horizontal, not just the vertical. Well, that's all I had left. That's not so bad. Okay. Flip it over to press. Our strip is always on top. I'm not going all the way to the edge of the strip. I'm probably about 1/2 inch in from it. Okay, so there's our log cabin. Not sure which way. I guess it would be maybe this way or this way. Doesn't matter. And after you make your blocks for a log cabin, there's like 10 different ways that you can place them to get totally different looks. And I'll go into that when I work on this quilt. So, you know, over the coming months. Trust me, I'm not gonna make the whole quilt in April. You can let that thought go. Okay, so there we are. So here's where we started, and we just went around and around and around. Okay. So this is, I don't know, maybe I'll leave it at 3. This is about 10 and a half, so it would finish at 10. So I don't know. I'll do one more row and post it on Facebook next week, and then I'll take another one and just do 3 rows, and we'll see which one we like better. But you could do just the 3. So if you do less strips, you got to do more blocks, kind of thing. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Lights on one side, darks on the other, and you can see here. There's not a big difference in the shading of these. It doesn't go from like real light to real dark. So if I switch these around on any of the other blocks, nobody will know the difference. They don't all have to be the same unless you're going for a certain, unless you're going for a certain look. Okay. So I did these at 2-inch cut. The center is a 2-inch square, just so you know which one I use. So this finishes at 1.5. Okay, I thought the 2.5 cut was a little big, and the 1.5 cut. It's when you sew 1.5 and it becomes 1 inch, it's more noticeable if you don't sew straight. So I think this is a good size. Cut 2, finished 1.5. That would be my recommendation. Okay, so let's see. Now, Lynn says, how come you know me so well? Yeah, I know you and the pins. Rhonda and the iron. Okay. Oh, thanks, Rhonda. Yeah, I kind of like this fabric. It's different than what I usually have, and I dug around in my inventory and I found it, and I thought, I'm going to add that to my April, I call it my April Insanity list. So maybe some of you will be joining in. So let me just check. There's no other questions. So thanks everyone for joining in. Remember, we used the fabric strip set to do this whole thing. So and this isn't more affordable. I want to say I think it's like 40 something, maybe 45 when it's not on sale. So you might be able to get it you just watch for it to be on sale. But to have all of those strip sizes is really pretty cheap. In actuality, I know it's a lot of money, but it's cheap. It's not a lot of money for what you get, I guess is what I was trying to say. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining in. Hope you had a good time. See you next Thursday at the same time. 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget Saturday sew along. I have to work Saturday in an embroidery class. So we're 1:30 on Saturday. And I'll put a reminder up on Facebook with a picture of what we're doing. I knew what it was the other day, and then I didn't write it down, so I have to think about it again. I try to keep it a little easy because we're starting later after I do another class. So again, thanks everybody for joining in, and see you next time. Bye-bye.